Our theme for this month is belonging. And right now, in our historical moment in our country, I firmly believe that belonging is a moral obligation. It's a civic duty. And for Unitarian Universalists, it's also a religious duty and obligation. I believe belonging is so crucial because it is only in community with others that we can create a worthwhile society that fosters full inclusion, full participation by everyone. And because doing this actively works against and defeats the growing environment of political dehumanization that, if left unchecked, will lead to atrocities. Belonging is a tactic and a tool for defeating the growing shadow of fascism in our country. Belonging. I don't think it means what we tend to think it means, and I love Brene Brown's definition from her research. And she says, belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than ourselves, which requires us to be present to our authentic selves and present our authentic selves rather than merely fitting in. True belonging happens when we fully accept ourselves as we are and connect with others without sacrificing who we are and allowing them to do the same. She says fitting in, and I think this is what we usually think of as belonging. Fitting in is just getting along with everything, feeling an affinity. It's the greatest barrier to belonging. Fitting in, she says, I've discovered during the past decade of my research, is assessing situations and groups of people and twisting yourself into a human pretzel in order to let you hang out with them. So you'll be accepted. Belonging is something else entirely. It's showing up and letting yourself be seen and known as you really are. It takes a lot of risk and vulnerability to do that. And she says, as it turns out, men and women who have the deepest sense of true belonging are the people who also have the courage to stand alone when called to do that. They are willing to maintain their integrity and risk deconnection in order to stand up for what they believe in. This definition of belonging is one that can create and sustain inclusive, diverse, compassionate, participatory communities. And this type of community, the belonging-based community, is essential for healthy, vital, and democratically governed systems, be they congregations or governments. Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams argued that voluntary associations, groups we belong to freely, help sustain and maintain democracy in a larger society. In his essay, The Indispensable Discipline of Social Responsibility, which we heard in our reading this morning, Adams makes a strong case for the moral necessity, the moral obligation of belonging to voluntary associations that work for democratic norms and the common good. Belonging to voluntary associations is a basic, fundamental human right. It is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations in 1948. It's Article 20, as a matter of fact, which says everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. Freedom of association is intimately tied to the freedoms of thought, speech, conscience, and religion, the right to vote, to participate in democracy, and enjoy social security, health, education, work, leisure, all human rights which are outlined in the Universal Declaration, the articles immediately before and after the one on voluntary associations. They're all connected. And in this morning's reading, Adams is clear that he says every totalitarian theory rejects this freedom of association. Indeed, the rejection of freedom of association, the rejection of freedom to form groups that attempt democratically to affect public policy, can serve as actually the beginning of the definition of totalitarianism. And Adams admitted there are different types of voluntary associations. One he characterized as more a special interest group. And when we form voluntary associations, we do tend to group ourselves, all humans do, into groups of like-minded or similar types of people. In and of itself, nothing wrong with that. And the other type of association, he said, is a general welfare association that's concerned with the general good and welfare of the entire society, its health and well-being. You know, my neighbor belongs to the Lions, for example. And they do a lot of things that have become a real part of my community's character. You know, they run a hayride in the fall at Halloween. They put up luminaries with candles all along the main street during the holiday season from Thanksgiving to New Year. It's really pretty. They do cookouts, 4th of July fireworks, all awesome events, all have a part in defining the character of where I live in Woodbury. All great stuff, but nothing that specifically or intentionally does a lot of work to ensure, promote the common good. Nothing wrong with it, good stuff nonetheless, and important in many ways. I'm in the process myself of joining the Club União Portuguesa in Naugatuck, which is a social club for people of Portuguese heritage. My wife says it's going to be my old man club. And I don't think she's wrong. I can totally see myself wearing my hat and a stained white t-shirt, grilling sardines. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely great stuff. But again, nothing that's by its mission and design geared to affect the public life. A great thing nonetheless, and a vibrant society needs these groups, you know, but it's not a general welfare oriented group. And one thing Adams, I don't think fully comprehended about what he called special interest groups is that they have a value that is also really important for the general welfare sometimes. For example, it's good to have specific places, special interest places, especially for marginalized groups. Black only, women only, Muslim only, queer only spaces and associations are at the same time special interest groups, but they're also general welfare groups because they help and sustain those communities that need connection with each other, because unless all are free, none of us are free. And Adams says the voluntary general welfare associations are a requirement of a functioning democracy. He spent time in Germany in the mid-1930s, and he watched in person the Nazis rise to power there. And obviously, it had an enormous effect on his theology the rest of his life. And he always insisted thereafter, that the church, and you can read that as the faith community, whatever your religion, right? The religious community had to be discussed always in both theological, religious, and sociological terms. I would put it this way, that there really is no such thing as an apolitical religion, nor can there be or should be. Because if your religious values are about anything really valuable, they're concerned with the common good and treating everybody decently. And if you divorce yourself from that to be apolitical, that is the epitome of privilege, to not have to be connected to those types of decisions and removed from them. So I think religion is by its nature, with Adams, a political phenomenon. It has to be. And he says, any worthwhile religious community is concerned with the common good. My colleague, the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd, writes in a paper she wrote about Adams that Adams made was at the time a radical theological claim that religious identity is both formed and expressed in collective action rather than individual truth or private devotion. She writes, Adams reminded us that we were called to engage not just in voluntary associations, but radical voluntary associations, one whose greater ends pointed toward the eschaton, the end, beyond everything we have come to know as normal. By radical voluntary association, he meant the League of Women Voters, the Neighborhood Association, the PTA, the Broad-Based Community Organization, Greater Danbury Unites for Immigrants, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. He says, the mission of the church, the faith community, pointed outward beyond itself and toward the continual reshaping of the world outside its doors is its vital mission. In this way, the radical voluntary associations Adams spoke of are the ones that committed themselves to different ends, more important ends than just debate societies or social clubs. And she says his wisdom in this is evergreen. It is as necessary in these days as it has ever been. And as I think of it, James Luther Adams says that work as a radical voluntary association involved in the social and political life of society is what makes the faith community sacred and holy. My colleague Gary Dorian writes that Adams insisted liberal religion is always about a life-giving community, not about an individual's personal spirituality. And because of that, it must take place within one. A faith community, he says, that creates no community of faith is merely a protection against having faith at all. Brene Brown hadn't been born yet when Adams published The Indispensable Discipline of Social Responsibility. But his ideas about radical voluntary associations dovetail beautifully with her definition of belonging. I think the ability to engage and generate and create genuine belonging is a defining characteristic of what Adams would call a radical voluntary association, a general welfare organization, especially a faith community. One of the reasons that totalitarian regimes and dictators hate voluntary organizations is that voluntary organizations have an outstanding ability to create real belonging based on authentic, inclusive relationships. And this type of belonging humanizes people. It makes someone else more like you. You see them as a total person, the way you know yourself to be a total person. And when someone is seen to be as like yourself as a human being, it is much more difficult to intentionally hurt, harm, and kill them. Humanizing people works against totalitarianism's most powerful weapon, the dehumanizing, scapegoating of groups to create a sense of unity and power and belonging among an identity base. And we see this play out right now. MAGA is powerful because it pretends to be offering people belonging to an in-group with power. But it's not about belonging. It's just about fitting in. To adopt what the leader says is so, to go along with everyone else's opinion, to be just like that other person in the group. Social media gives a false sense of belonging, and its logarithms emphasize fitting in, being a member of a team, a side. But it doesn't generate debate or conversation. It's not a place where it's safe to be vulnerable or be accepted as you really are, imperfections and all. Brené Brown calls it common enemy intimacy, where you are drawn together mostly in agreement about what you dislike. It's just about fitting in. And the chief measure of fitting in is that you are not the other. You're one of us, not one of them. The Nazis' term for it was getting in line. Kind of like the way we want ABC to now get in line. Belonging confers social acceptance and equalizes us and radically humanizes us. It has us include others for who they are, just as they really are. Othering requires the monsterization of the other. They have a nature that isn't really quite human. It's monstrous, dangerous, intrinsically repellent. Vermin, roaches, rats, snakes, serpents. In order for human beings to treat other human beings as non-human and less than human, we have to overcome an evolutionarily based instinctual bias to recognize our own kind and treat them with compassion. And to do that, we have to make the other person not a person. And this can be done in all kinds of ways. Black people in America looked physically like humans. Native peoples looked like people. Jewish people in Nazi Germany looked like people, but they were not. Blacks and Indians and Jews, now immigrants and Palestinians and trans people look like people, but they're not. They have some kind of essence, something about them that's obviously different, obviously inferior. There's a group called polygeneticists that believe that different groups of humans actually evolve differently and independently. Talk about the mental gymnastics you need to make someone not human like you are. Wow. Others might appear outwardly human, but if you're going to dehumanize them, you have to prove one way or another, as reasonable or unreasonable as that is, that they're not. In his book, Less Human, Why We Demean, Enslave, and Exterminate Each Other, David Livingstone Smith writes, everywhere and in all times and places, there has been slavery, genocide, and atrocities. The others are dehumanized and characterized as vermin, rats, serpents, snakes, insects, and monkeys. This has always been true of slavery wherever it happens in any time and culture. Harvard sociologist Orlando Patterson said the defining characteristic of slavery is social death. You have no social recognition. You're a non-person. You're a thing, an animal. Rat, vermin, serpent, dragon, monkey, beast. Native peoples have been called these things and are called these things still by colonizers all over the world. The Ottoman Empire spoke of the Armenians this way. The Nazis called the Jews these things. The Khmer Rouge referred to the Chinese and Vietnamese and other ethnic minorities this way. In Rwanda, the Hutus referred to these terms of the Tutsis. Putin speaks of Ukrainians this way. Netanyahu speaks of Palestinians this way. Trump speaks of people of color and trans people and immigrants this way. It leads to atrocity. And increasingly, we hear the rhetoric, of talking about people who just disagree with the administration in these terms. David Livingston Smith says, demoting a population to subhuman status excludes them from the universe of moral obligation. Dehumanizing others promotes moral disengagement. It's not wrong to hurt, torture, and kill members of that group because they're not actually human. And because of all that stuff, this is why belonging is so vital and such an important weapon at our disposal. Belonging is the antidote to dehumanization. It is an emergent process that has as a core function humanizing the other with whom you're in relationship, because it means being vulnerable, risking, being yourself, and letting others do the same. And that will lead to difficulties and problems and arguments. But with belonging, the goal is the coming together, agreeing to get to the point where we resolve those, and the acceptance widens and grows and deepens. It's the exact opposite of getting in line and fitting in. Going along to get along, not making waves. Being involved in civic organizations for the explicit mission of making politics and citizenship about belonging is vital. Radical associations offer the opportunity for belonging and seek to influence the larger society through democratic means to also create that belonging and seek that belonging as a goal, to make we the people include all people, to make sure promoting the general welfare means promoting it for everyone. Adams begins his essay in the reading today by noting that in Germany, associations that didn't bow to Nazi ideology were one by one closed down. Funding removed from universities, professors fired for teaching certain ideas, people removed from public roles in public life for being one of them. The levers of money and power move the fitting in ideology of who we are opposed to them at the center of life. They want to make being opposed to this group the center of everything. And we're going to attempt to exterminate that opposition. In order to fight against belonging, the authoritarian makes it difficult to participate in organizations such as civic groups and congregations that work for freedom. They say the world is run by those who show up. And if you want to run the world, all you got to do is control who can and can't show up. Make work hours long and vacation rare. Make wages low and restrict access to resources. Make the general welfare, things like education and healthcare and housing, a privilege, not a human right. Make sure that entertainment and propaganda is geared towards making everyone fit in and toe the line. We're seeing this play out in real time, my friends. But we have belonging as an important essence of who we are as a people of covenant. And we need to dive into that work of creating belonging and exercising it and opening up to as many people as possible, because it's a way we fight back against all this that's going on. You may not be thinking of it this way right now, but the committee fair that's going to happen in a few moments, that's a way to fight back against the dehumanizing stuff we see going on in our culture. Getting involved in a group such as ours or Greater Danbury Unites for Immigrants or some similar activist group, your involvement at whatever level you can be involved at, whatever you can do, helps the greater cause of belonging and the common good humanize everyone instead of dehumanize everyone. And you may not be thinking of it in that powerful a way, but realize that when people are asking you to think about how you're involved in the congregation, it's not just, oh, some little thing I agreed to do at my social club. It's actually part of the vital reason why a place like this exists, to generate humanizing community that fights all the things that would darken it. It is a way to resist. It is a way to fight back. It is a way to create the world we know we should have, not the one we're having to deal with right now. Like the villagers in this morning's story, we weave not only a tapestry, but a society and a culture of unity and diversity and beauty when we seek and practice belonging. It's a civic, religious, and moral duty. Join me in practicing it.
Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.